But also, it was a great script, and it was just, everybody liked each other. It doesn't happen.
Why was Luke Skywalker rejected as Mozart? Did real tension between the actors mirror their characters' hatred, yet was dismissed for being too recognizable as Luke Skywalker? Another strong contender was a young Kenneth Branagh, who recast Americans in the leads. Tim Curry, famous for his flamboyant turn in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, had also performed Mozart on stage and was seriously considered. Even Mel Gibson, then an emerging star, was on the shortlist. And in one of the strangest what-ifs in Hollywood history, Mick Jagger, yes, the Rolling Stones frontman, auditioned for the role of Mozart. It's hard to imagine the flamboyant rock icon in powdered wigs and lace collars, but for a brief moment, it was almost a reality. The pursuit for Salieri was of equal measure and pressure. The character demanded a very subtle man, a man who would envelop all in envy, but would nevertheless be seen as dignified enough to attract sympathy. The studio suggested a few major names, namely Al Pacino and Donald Sutherland, along with others. It is true that both of these actors would have lent gravitas to the part, but director Milos Forman preferred something more delicate. Someone who could illustrate Salieri's silent suffering without being too loud. He finally picked F. Murray Abraham, a seasoned theater actor with a small film career. Abraham's subtle, martyrs-like enactment would eventually bring him the Academy Award for Best Actor. The victory being a confirmation of Forman's unorthodox intuition. The most bizarre and weird casting twist of all came from the absurdity of a studio proposal. One of the big studios was willing to cover the whole of the $18 million production cost, but only if Walter Matthau, who was in his 60s at that time, would be the one to portray Mozart. Matthau had been a sitcom and drama actor whom the audience adored. Nevertheless, to his credit, the casting would have been great. However, it would have been an unintended comical movie. Forman didn't think twice. He said no right away, to not sacrifice the artistic side for the financial. If you think these surprising facts about the film Amadeus were wild, wait until you see what's next. 9. The last-minute casting crisis. In the unpredictable world of filmmaking, some of the most iconic performances arise from pure chance, and Amadeus offers a perfect example of this. Just days before shooting began, the production faced a crisis that could have derailed the entire schedule. The role of Constanze Mozart, the vibrant, outspoken wife of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, had already been cast. The talented actress Meg Tilly, then an emerging star, had been chosen for the part after an extensive audition process. She had completed rehearsals, donned her period costumes, and was ready to bring Constanze to life. Everything was set for production to begin. Then, in one disastrous moment, fate intervened in the most unexpected way. During a casual soccer game with other cast and crew members, Tilly suffered a serious leg injury, a torn ligament that made it impossible for her to continue. What was meant to be a lighthearted game turned into a nightmare for both the actress and the production team. Director Milos Forman suddenly found himself without a leading actress just days before filming was scheduled to start. The crew had invested weeks in preparation, and any delay would cost the studio thousands of dollars each day. It was a classic Hollywood emergency, and the solution had to be found immediately. Enter Elizabeth Berridge, a rather obscure actress back then. Without the opportunity to have long audition sessions, do chemistry tests, or even full costume fittings, she was practically overnight put into the role.
How are we supposed to live, Wolfie? Do you want me to go in the streets and beg?
The situation was, to say the least, chaotic. Berridge herself confessed later that she had practically no time at all to take in what was going on. One day, she was an unnoticed young actress, and the other day, a big star sharing the screen with Tom Hulce and F. Murray Abraham in a major Hollywood production. The burden of the chance and the accountability was huge. However, she was able to catch the film's tone and rhythm with her performance, which turned out to be just right for the whole thing. Berridge's innate charisma, emotional generosity, and an atmosphere of improvisation contributed a lot to her acting of Constanze's feelings, very real and extremely human. She gave a playful side and a timid side to the character that was a great match to Hulse's eccentric Mozart. Both critics and the public were very impressed by Berridge's acting, and many of them did not even know that she had been cast just at the last moment. What might have been a disaster turned out to be one of the hidden victories of the film, proof of the instinct, luck, and the unpredictable mixture of factors in filmmaking. 8. The impossible musical perfection. When Tom Hulse was cast as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart in Milos Forman's Amadeus, he faced a challenge that would have terrified most actors. Mozart was not only one of history's greatest composers, but also a musical prodigy whose genius seemed otherworldly. Capturing that brilliance on screen required more than acting skill. It demanded a level of authenticity that bordered on impossible. Hulse was a trained guitarist, not a pianist, and many assumed the production would rely on camera tricks and hand doubles to make his piano playing look believable. But Hulse, driven by the same obsessive spirit that defined his character, refused to fake it. He wanted every movement, every finger strike, and every expression to be real. Hulse was trained on piano for 6 months before filming began. He engaged in this process for about 6 months, practicing every day from 4 to 6 hours, and getting permission from professional instructors to take the lead for such gifted piano players as Mozart. Most of the pieces that he was going to play were not simple tunes. On the contrary, they were the most complex and technically challenging pieces in classical music. Hulse did not limit himself to just learning them, and he did not just get the timing and motion of each note right. He memorized. His commitment went so far as he actually managed to play one specific passage lying on his back, totally in sync with the camera's zoom. In fact, a scene that stands out as one of the most attractive moments in the movie. Director Milos Forman was really surprised by the determination of Hulse. Even though the crew was ready to shoot close-up hand shots with doubles, they soon found out that they didn't need them at all. Hulse's acting was almost impeccable. When the music from Mozart's soundtrack was played, his hand gestures synchronized with the notes completely. Then, some music teachers watched the film parts very carefully, checking what Hulse was playing against what the audience was hearing. The conclusion was jaw-dropping. There was not even one mistake in striking the keys. Each and every move was in perfect harmony with the score, a feat that is nearly impossible in the history of film. 7. The presenter who forgot the nominees. The 57th Academy Awards in 1985 were a night filled with anticipation, glamour, and history in the making. Among the nominees for Best Picture were some of the most acclaimed films of the year: A Passage to India, Places in the Heart, A Soldier's Story, and Amadeus. The award for Best Picture is traditionally the most prestigious moment of the evening, the crowning jewel of Hollywood's biggest night. When the legendary actor Sir Laurence Olivier took the stage to present it, the atmosphere was electric. Audiences and nominees alike held their breath, knowing that this single envelope held the key to cinematic immortality. The live coverage of the Oscars was pretty much a test of the audience's patience, but still, what happened next is going to be remembered as one of the most awkward and oddly delightful occasions in the history of the Oscars. Olivier, who is considered by many to be the best actor in both theater and movies, was in poor health then. He was feeling ill and very tired, but he still managed to open the envelope, take a short pause, and just say, "Amadeus." The audience cheered loudly, but soon confusion set in almost right away. Olivier had totally missed the most important step, reading out the names of the nominees. This mistake, although minor, yet crucial, broke one of the Oscars' longest-running rituals and, for a moment, turned the whole event upside down. For a few seconds, no one was quite sure what had actually occurred. Was Olivier declaring a winner or giving a nominee? The audience was silent, waiting for an announcement. Finally, an Academy representative ran to the microphone and informed the audience that indeed, Amadeus had won the Oscar for Best Picture. A moment that should have been a simple one of victory turned into a mix of festivity and slight chaos. Yet the error still managed to bring a bit of warmth and human touch to the otherwise very organized event. It was a rare, unplanned exposure of imperfection in the ceremony, which is known for its accuracy. Saul Zaentz, the producer and director, during the presentation of the award to the Oscar-winning film, handled the case with grace and professionalism. Unveiling Olivier's iconic position in cinema, Zaentz expressed his hearty thanks and proceeded to do the one thing that Olivier had omitted, naming all the other nominees. His quick thinking brought back the harmony that had prevailed at the ceremony and made sure that the films in the running got their share of recognition. Instead of burying the victory under the winning ceremony, the situation created a strangely endearing note to Amadeus's exceptional victory, which comprised 8 Oscars that night, including the Best Picture one. 6. The Skywalker Shadow. When Amadeus was being adapted from stage to screen, many assumed that one actor was destined to play the role of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Mark Hamill. At the time, Hamill was fresh off the global success of Star Wars, having become a household name as Luke Skywalker. What many didn't know was that after Return of the Jedi, Hamill sought to prove himself as more than a sci-fi hero. He turned to the theater, where he took on the demanding role of Mozart in the Broadway production of Amadeus, performing the part 8 shows a week. His portrayal was energetic, eccentric, and surprisingly layered, earning him respect from critics who had doubted his dramatic range. So when the film adaptation was announced, it seemed only natural that Hamill would reprise the role that had defined his post-Star Wars career. Nevertheless, fate was not on Hamill's side. The creative genius who directed the critically acclaimed film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Milos Forman, had something else in mind. For all the stage success of Hamill, Forman would not give him even a chance to try out for the role. His case was both straightforward and crushing. Mark Hamill was too well known. The filmmaker was of the opinion that people would not be able to distinguish the actor playing the Jedi from the musician. He later stated, "The lightsaber was too bright, the shadow of Skywalker too long." To him, no matter how great Hamill's acting could have been, the spectators would see only Luke, not Mozart. This choice reveals one of the constant problems of Hollywood, the curse of typecasting. Hamill's stardom, which was a blessing for most actors, turned out to be his greatest hindrance. His Star Wars connection was so strong that it kept him out of the main cinema for years. He had to rely on minor parts and voice acting for his livelihood, and losing Amadeus was like losing a turning point in his career. The turning point when his legacy as Skywalker began to overshadow everything else. Paradoxically, the very traits that made him an ideal Mozart on stage, innocent exuberance, wild imaginativeness, and emotional openness, were the very same that characterized his role in Star Wars. The role of Mozart finally went to Tom Hulce, who at that time was a fairly unknown actor. Hulce became the nominee for the Best Actor of the Academy Awards.
I think it's only fitting that Mozart should accept his award.
Due to his performance and has established his name in the film business. However, the question still arises about how different Amadeus would have been if Hamill were the one to perform that part. Would his theater experience contribute more to the character's development? Or would his fame take away from the movie's realism? Think you've heard it all? The next surprising fact about Amadeus will make you question everything you didn't know. Playing with fire, literally. One of the most breathtaking elements of Amadeus is its visual authenticity. The way every frame feels steeped in the grandeur and atmosphere of 18th century Europe. Director Milos Forman was obsessed with realism. He wanted his audience not just to watch history, but to feel it, to breathe the same candlelit air that Mozart once did. This relentless pursuit of authenticity led to a decision that was both inspired and terrifying. Instead of using artificial lighting, Foreman insisted on filming several major opera sequences by candlelight, real, open-flame candlelight, inside the actual Estates Theatre in Prague. This wasn't just any building. It was the very same 18th-century wooden theatre where Mozart himself had premiered Don Giovanni in 1787. The filming location for the movie was the Estates Theatre, which was already more than 200 years old at that time.
History was made here. Look at this beautiful theater.
Furthermore, the historical monument, made primarily of wood, was priceless. Nevertheless, the production team managed to fill the whole theater with hundreds of candles, lanterns, and fire pots to give the audience a visual sensation of the 18th century. The fire hazard was not only the smoke from the candles, but also the costumes, props, and wigs used in the movie, which were the same as during the era and were flammable. The silk gowns, the powdered wigs, and the velvet drapes made the place an absolute tinderbox. The cinematographer, Miroslav Ondřejček, painstakingly controlled the lighting, but no amount of caution could completely eliminate the danger. Each scene was a tightrope walk between art and security, and everyone on the crew was aware that one bad move could turn into a catastrophe. Production designer Patricia von Brandenstein, who later on received an Oscar for the same project, confessed that she was constantly worried, and loss of sleep was the result. She went on to explain her worry that a tiny spark from one of the candles would be enough to set the whole building on fire. "I really thought God would punish me if this place would go up in flames," she said later. Crew members who were off camera always kept nearby buckets filled with water and fire extinguishers, ready to react to the slightest sign of smoke. In some takes, the assistants were hidden just outside the frame, nervously watching the fire as the actors performed with tenacious materials around them. Heck, even if it was unsafe, the results were frankly magical. The light from the candles gave the scenes a different quality and made the atmosphere such that no lighting of modern times was able to do this. The gradual burning of the real lights on silk, wood, and human bodies gave the film a quality of being a painting, and it was as if the world of Amadeus was residing in a place between history and fantasy. Those radiant operatic performances are still very much alive, because they had been, not by bulbs and gels, but by fire itself, lighted. 4. The whiskey-fueled laugh. Few sounds in cinema are as instantly recognizable as Mozart's laugh in Amadeus. High-pitched, manic, and bursting with nervous energy, it became one of the film's most unforgettable trademarks. Yet, behind that laughter lies a strange and rather intoxicating story. Actor Tom Hulce, who portrayed the musical genius, didn't just invent the laugh on a whim, he had to wrestle with it. During filming, director Milos Forman wanted Mozart's laughter to embody both brilliance and madness, a sound that could make audiences smile and squirm at the same time. Hulce developed a wild, shrill cackle that captured Mozart's eccentricity perfectly. It became so iconic that even those who haven't seen the movie often recognize the sound from parodies and clips. But when post-production started, sound mixing, and more importantly, understanding the character of the movie titled Amadeus, became a Herculean task for Hulce. Almost half a year had flown since the film was made, and when the producers ordered him to put in a laugh for certain scenes, he was caught off guard, realizing that he could not recreate the laughter. Though he had earlier been able to do those very high pitches, now the pitch was gone, and so was the energy. It was like Mozart had left him completely. Panic took over. The laugh had become the main component of the character, and the final mix without it would sound very dull and lose most of its enchantment. Hulce kept trying, but each of his attempts sounded either forced or unnatural. Suddenly, he, not the producers, came up with a solution. It might not be the most common one, but it was certainly the most unconventional. He took whiskey to whiskey and smoke to clear his throat and to reclaim the madness he usually had. After taking a few strong ones, he threw off his inhibitions, he antiphones, and all of a sudden, the laugh emerged. Though his taking of liquor had become his excuse for being nonchalant, and the crazy laughter had been freed to come like it was during the shooting. The method worked so well that it was turned into a standard method of operation whenever extra audio recording was required. The whiskey-fueled laugh was invented, and it was just as unconventional and artistic as the character he portrayed. Curiously, a few of the biographers have inferred that the authentic Mozart could possibly have a laugh that was equally unique, characterized by the loudness, sharpness, and somewhat strangeness mentioned in the letters of his contemporaries. Although there is no absolute evidence, this coincidence indeed adds a further layer of mystery to Holz's depiction. Whether it was meant or not, he took the portrayal deeper into Mozart's personality, which was the mix of happiness, eccentricity, and chaos that characterized both the man and his music. 3. The deliberate confusion. Among the many unforgettable moments in Amadeus, one scene stands above the rest for its emotional and artistic intensity. The sequence where a feverish, dying Mozart dictates his requiem to his rival, Antonio Salieri. The scene is a masterpiece of tension and humanity. Mozart, frail and delirious, struggles to channel divine inspiration, while Salieri, trembling with both awe and jealousy, frantically tries to keep up. It's one of those rare cinematic moments that feels utterly real, and, as it turns out, much of that authenticity came from a clever bit of improvisation. Actor Tom Hulce, who played Mozart, intentionally set out to confuse his co-star, F. Murray Abraham, during the filming of this scene. Hulce knew that the key to making the moment believable was to capture Salieri's genuine frustration.
Now, trumpets and timpani, trumpets in D.
No.
Listen to me.
I don't understand.
Listen.
As he tried to follow the torrent of musical ideas pouring from Mozart's fevered mind. To achieve this, Hulce began deliberately skipping lines, jumping ahead in the score, and altering his rhythm without warning. Each time Abraham thought he knew where the dictation was going, Hulce would abruptly change direction, forcing him to react in real time. The confusion and exasperation that flicker across Abraham's face are not just brilliant acting, they are real, unfiltered responses to Hulce's unpredictable behavior. The method created a rare kind of cinematic electricity, truth disguised as performance. Director Milos Forman straight away felt the impact of what was going on during filming. He didn't scold Hulce or demand that he adhere to the script. A conversation that might have been just routine turned into a very clear and lively representation of two men who were stuck in the same creative tornado, one full of inspiration and the other one who absorbed it all and got cracked up. 2. The real-life rivalry. At the heart of Amadeus lies one of cinema's most captivating rivalries, the poisonous dance of admiration and jealousy between Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Antonio Salieri. Their on-screen relationship, fraught with envy and awe, drives the film's emotional core. Yet what makes the performances of Tom Hulce and F. Murray Abraham so extraordinary is that the tension between them wasn't entirely acting. Behind the scenes, their dynamic began to mirror that of their characters, creating a fascinating overlap between art and reality. The result was a genuine rivalry that, while never explosive, simmered beneath the surface throughout production, lending their interactions an edge of authenticity that can still be felt decades. F. Murray Abraham, who portrayed Salieri, later admitted that real feelings of resentment crept into his relationship with Hulce. In interviews, he recalled that during early rehearsals, Hulce spent a great deal of time with Meg Tilly, the actress originally cast as Constanze. The two were close friends and often shared private jokes, which unintentionally left Abraham feeling excluded. He described feeling pushed out, developing a sense of bitterness that eerily mirrored Salieri's jealousy toward Mozart. "I began to have very nasty feelings," he confessed, "that were exactly like Salieri's feelings toward Mozart. It was an extraordinary case of life imitating art, or perhaps art pulling life into its orbit." Tom Hulce, on his part, also recognized the tension. He appreciated Abraham's ability but admitted that their collaboration sometimes had great difficulties. Holtz recounted times of suspicion and competition that were not openly expressed, but their emotional separation turned out to be a good factor in their acting. They were polite and sometimes approached each other friendly manner, but still, the rivalry was there. Both actors were totally dedicated to their art, and in the attempt to outshine each other, the film's intensity was increased. It seemed like each man was directing his character's feelings not only to the story, but also to the person at the opposite side. Just when you think Amadeus couldn't get any more dramatic, the ultimate surprising fact about the film Amadeus is coming up. 1. The Real Man in the Mask. One of the most haunting and memorable images in Amadeus is the mysterious masked figure who visits Mozart late at night, commissioning a requiem mass that ultimately drives him to exhaustion and death. Cloaked in black and silent as a ghost, the figure becomes a symbol of death itself, a chilling embodiment of guilt and obsession. In the film, the man behind the mask is revealed to be Antonio Salieri, secretly plotting to push Mozart toward madness while taking credit for his final masterpiece. It's a brilliant, dramatic twist, one that adds psychological depth to their rivalry. But in reality, the story of the masked stranger is rooted in truth. Only, the real man had nothing to do with Salieri. The actual historical event took place in 1791, the year of Mozart's death. A man did approach, and this time the requiem was commissioned from him, but it was Count Franz von Walsegg who did so. Walsegg was no villain. On the contrary, he was a Pole of oddity and had a most ridiculous habit. He would grow famous composers who were secretly hired, then pass their works as his own at private concerts. He was going to do this with the Requiem, planning to put himself as the author at the time when it was performed to celebrate his deceased wife's memory. The commission was handled in total secrecy. Walsegg's messenger was dressed in gray, not black, but the impact on Mozart was very deep. Mozart, already sick and overworked, was absorbed in the work. He thought he was writing the Requiem for his own funeral. His health deteriorated very quickly, and he died before the end of it. In contrast to the movie plot, Salieri was totally uninvolved in the whole affair. The finishing of the Requiem music was given to one of Mozart's pupils, Franz Xaver Süssmayr, who combined the last parts from the master's sketches and notes. The final version became one of the most respected works of classical music, and forever.